Hey everyone, welcome to the show Off the Record. I'm Aram Melkoumov, the host. Thanks for tuning in. As you know, on the show, I'm interviewing well-known CEOs and VCs about how to spend the money you raise effectively and what mistakes to avoid. My guests have been in the trenches and have lots of practical advice to share, from company stories, failures, and successes. As a founder, you'll hear what you can do better when raising money and after you have raised the money, all in a 30-minute conversation. And if you happen to be a VC, you're also in the right spot. You'll get to learn from your peers. So this is episode number 10, and I'm joined by another great founder and CEO on our show. Ilya Brotzky is the CEO and co-founder of Vanhack. He's building a company that promises the fastest way to hire tech talent. Today, employers on Vanhack can access a community of 200,000 highly skilled tech professionals from 100 plus countries. It's the largest such community in the world. He has several articles on Forbes, BetaKit, and the Globe and Mail, and he's very active on LinkedIn with a network of over 32,000 followers. And he's actually raised very little money, around 120,000. So Ilya, great to have you on the show. Welcome.
Thanks, Ram. It's a huge pleasure to be here.
Awesome. So just to give all the listeners some, background context. So when we spoke, I've known you for years, and on the show, we talk about raising funding, and we had different people raise different rounds of funding. But I wanted you to participate in the show because you kind of took a different path. Like you graduated from Techstars in Berlin. You got some initial of that capital when you were graduating from the accelerated program. And then you were kind of at like a critical point in terms of, do I go raise money? Like, what are the options there? And then what you did, which I would love to kind of learn more about, because it's a story that I think is very interesting for people to decide what path is best right for them and like whether or not they need to raise money and not. So how about we kind of start off there? If you could tell us in terms of like, back then you were in Berlin going through the Techstars Accelerator, kind of like, let's jump back in time for a little bit and tell us about that story.
Definitely, yeah. I miss those days. I know you're in Europe right now, and so great place to be. Yeah, so we got into Techstars Berlin January 2017 and spent the 3 months there getting integrated into the Berlin ecosystem, the German startup ecosystem. Went through the whole Mentor Madness Techstars program, and then demo day was approaching. And we were, like everyone, excited to raise money, had practiced our pitch and everything. And after demo day, we got a bunch of meetings with VCs and angels, a good mix of folks, and went to all those meetings excited and pitching and doing all the stuff that they tell you to do, and frankly fell flat on my face. So every time I pitched, I would get a lot of the same kind of feedback. This is a lifestyle business. This is never going to scale. This is a VC business, et cetera, when we had other companies in our space that have raised money and some more successful than others, but a lot of American or North American VCs have invested in those kind of companies. So we were trying to raise €500,000 and raise €0. And so I was really like feeling frustrated and kind of down on myself, like what's going on? What am I doing wrong? And then, that was in kind of March, April, May timeframe, April, May, June. And then September, October rolls around and the business really starts growing. I remember vividly October, I think 7th or 8th that year, we made like 9 hires in a day. It was like crazy. It was a record day for us at the time. And we ended up earning more than €500,000 in revenue in October, November, and December of 2017. And so I kind of had this idea or thought of like, you know what, the VCs don't want to give me money, but the customers do, and the customers don't take equity. So let's just focus on the customers. And since then, I've been a little bit more skeptical about fundraising and have kind of put it on the back burner. Not that I don't want to raise, and I would love to. If any VCs listening out there, happy to have a conversation. But it's also something that I'm not blindly chasing any VC that wants to give me a check and kind of saying, hey, like, let's get into business together. So yeah, that's kind of where I think a little maybe different experience than other founders have had.
Okay. And so that was a while ago. Where are you now? Like, how many people are you like ballpark revenue-wise? Like, have you grown substantially?
Sure. Yeah, we I guess one kind of cool stat is public. We had a 1,200% revenue growth year over year, or for the last 3 years. We were 39th fastest growing company in Canada according to Globe and Mail. Of course, not every company was actually participated in that survey, but was pretty cool to get that vanity metric recognition. We're just about to hit 40 people. Yeah, so it's kind of the stats.
Awesome. Cool. Thanks for sharing that. When we spoke before, I wanted to kind of talk about you were speaking to different investors at different times. Like, how do those first conversations about potential investment into Vanhack go?
Yeah. So do you want to talk about the kind of first ones back in 2015 or the ones in like the early ones?
Let's talk about the ones in 2015.
Sure. Yeah. So, I guess back then it was a side project and I didn't really take it too seriously. I thought maybe this could be something, but it wasn't really like my full on. It was my first, this has been, or Vanhack is kind of my first, quote unquote successful startup. Success is how you say, a spectrum, right? So I wouldn't say we're super successful, but we're, okay. And before that I had done a bunch of stuff that failed. So this was something that at the time I was thinking was going to be just another project that wasn't going to go forward, or didn't really have that big of a optimism on it or confidence in myself, frankly. So back then we had someone who invested in the business, and it kind of came naturally. Like, he was kind of a mentor. Actually, I'd worked for him at the time or previously, and he was kind of the first person to say, I think you guys should get some investment. And it was really just a natural conversation that happened, and he ended up investing. And it was a helpful at the time, but it wasn't like I had a full-time job at the time. We weren't really formally fundraising. It just kind of family and friends, the FFF, family, friends, and fools round early on. So, yeah.
And what came to you at that time in order to raise that capital? And how did you spend that initial capital that you raised?
Mostly on ads. Mostly on candidate acquisition, or at the time student acquisition. Before, when we were still very much focused on just being an ed tech companies, selling courses, English courses for developers. Vanhack's a two-sided marketplace that connects companies to senior developers, but we started off as an online school to teach developers English and soft skills. And so at the time we were running a lot of Facebook ad funnels. And looking back, I wish I raised more and put more money into that, because it was a really good channel back then. Now Facebook isn't that good of a channel, but Facebook ads were kind of our main source, or main source of new leads and candidates. So we spent quite a bit of money on that.
Mm-hmm. And so since that time, can you share with us some stories about you maybe speaking to some investors and any disagreements, or did you potentially have arguments with any investors about like equity or anything like that, throughout this whole journey?
Yeah, I had a few. I mean, I think what a lot of kind of founders don't think about, it's really like a marriage, right? Like any business partner or someone who invests into your company, you're going to be connecting them in a meaningful way for quite a while. So we had a kind of a moment where we had board seats. That was one. Like, I had a board seat, and the investor had a board seat, and there was some stress because it was just two people on the board, and like we didn't really know who was really going to make the decision at the end of the day, and I had to go through the contracts, and it was just one of those things that you don't really want to go through. But again, it was kind of my first time going through all this stuff, so a lot of mistakes made. We're still on good terms and everything. Just had a little bit of disagreements, and to get some lawyers involved and stuff like that, but it wasn't crazy. Like, we have worse horror stories. So yeah, I guess one of those things that, you just have to understand that even the person who you think is your best friend, there's going to be a point where you're angry at each other and there's a conflict. So you need to have something in place to resolve it.
Mm-hmm. And why do you think, for you or for other kind of early stage founders, why do you think research with investors that you bring on is so important, and why it's not kind of done enough or done well enough?
I think, like, taking a step back, I think just generally, I think people's first idea is like, I need to raise money and then I'll be successful. And I think it's the opposite. You think you need to be successful and then you need to raise money. Starting a business is I'm going to say this is not easy, but it's, I think, easier than it's ever been in terms of getting a website up, building something with Webflow or Bubble if you don't know how to code, and just starting to get, revenue in, put in Stripe, PayPal, and you got a business, right? Not every company is like that, of course, but some companies definitely require capital. But I think a lot of candidates, HR mind. I think a lot of entrepreneurs think about, I'm going to chase, and I was like this. I mean, back in 2014, 2015, I think even 2016, before we got to Techstars, I remember going down to 500 startups and being like super nervous. I was like, I'm going to the 500 startups office. Oh my God. You put these people on a pedestal, and when we did a program called Startup Chile, we had some people from YC come by, and like everyone was just looking at them like they're these superhumans. I think a lot of times you kind of feel like, and I think it's human nature, right? Like I will be happy when, right? And I think there's even a book called, I think, The Happiness Equation or something like that, happiness, where it's like you first be happy and then you be successful. The same thing here, like you first be successful and then you can raise money. So yeah, I think it's more that, like, just as an entrepreneur, don't chase the investor, chase the customer, chase the business, grow the business, and then you'll have so much more of a compelling story to tell investors. And then best case scenario, I don't know if you know Jason Calacanis, this Week in Startups, really good kind of podcaster. He talks about the Pegasus startup, where you can kind of fly over the funding rounds because you have this horse with wings. You can fly over because you're making enough money. And I think more companies should be like that. I'm proud to say we're kind of like that ourselves. And I think, not everyone's able to do that, but if you can be scrappy, and there's so many ways to make money online in your company, that you can. And I think, like, a lot of companies like yours, where you have an agency that does the service, then you can spin off a startup because of that. You can do that model as well. So yeah, I think that more entrepreneurs should have this focus, rather than saying, what, once I get my Series A from Sequoia, life will be, solved.
And we've been hearing that a lot. And there's always this emphasis on raising money, and once I get my Series A or I get money from these VCs, then I'm set, right? But up to that point, what would you recommend to early stage founders, first time founders even, in terms of how they should research the investors if they do go down that path? Because I'm sure you did some research and you had those conversations. Like,
yeah, I love how completely didn't answer your question, so you're asking it again. I got that. Yeah. I mean, I was thinking actually about that the other day. There's so much to do. Like, I think the best advice I heard is go to the portfolio page, and see and try and find if there's any companies that they don't have on the portfolio page anymore. Like maybe look Google News, the firm, see all the funding announcements that they've had, and if you see any of those funding announcements that aren't on the portfolio page, there's probably a problem there, where the company doesn't, or the VC doesn't want to publicly acknowledge that this is a company they've invested in and be associated with it. I've heard that someone bring that one up before, and I like that. Going to other founders in the portfolio, I think, is a good one. If there's a way for you to get in touch with the LP, although it's pretty much it's pretty private information who the LPs are in specific funds, and usually those people are very, very busy. But that could be something. Another thing that I've kind of asked or talked with VCs before is I've always asked them for introductions to potential customers. Especially, I think for our business, this kind of lends itself to that. Not every business is like that, but that could be one. And then potentially having some kind of dating period, where instead of you investing in me and buying as part of my company, and we have being on my board and all those things, maybe there's a way for us to kind of work together and leading up to that. So I think a lot of VCs talk about that too, where they prefer to see a trend line of a company and get to know them over a few years, and then when the company's ready to have a raise, then doing that. I think those are all kind of ways that come to mind, but I guess you don't really know until you actually start working together for real.
Well, hypothetically, say in the future, say through this podcast, you stumble upon an awesome investor that wants to invest in your business. It could happen, right?
Yeah, sure. Well, we've had many conversations. Yeah.
So at that time, if that opportunity comes your way, what would you look at in terms of giving up equity that you've spent so much time building and controlling? What would be that give and take kind of for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. I guess one thing I'll say is like, I'm pretty proud of the fact that we are at a point where we don't really need to raise. Like, of course, it'd be great to have X amount of $1 million in the bank and all that, but we can say no if we don't want to, right? So that's something that I feel very privileged and, work super hard to get to this point. Knock on wood, everything keeps going well. I think the biggest thing is not really like, I wouldn't look for specifically like to get the best valuation or having like the best, like the most amount of money raised. I think I would look more for someone who I can really partner with and work on a business with that's as passionate as I am, or as close to as passionate as I am about the space. We've talked to a few VCs, for example, who are like all about immigrant founders or all about marketplaces, and that kind of more niche focus into exactly what we do would be great. So kind of having that smart money, I think, is more interesting than, for example, like, I guess if SoftBank did want to invest in this, I won't say no to that with the crazy valuations that they give. But I think that'd be the way I look at it. And I think also, like, I run about my co-founder and the team, and just kind of make sure that this is something we're comfortable with. And yeah, it's one of those one-way doors. So want to make sure that it's the right fit. And I definitely feel like, and I hope to one day raise a ton of money, and be, grow even faster, et cetera, change more people's lives through the jobs we give them. But I also want to be cautious of that and not rush into it. So yeah, I think those are the main things.
What would be the main points of caution for you? Is it like maybe losing control, losing board seats, or?
Yeah, I don't want another boss, or don't want a boss. So that's kind of a tough point. Like, and I'm sure a lot of VCs will, kind of say we're founder first and friendly and all those things. And but yeah, the board right now is myself and my co-founder. Maybe if we have another VC join, like, I would never want to be in a point where like something like what happened. It's cliche to say, but like what happened with Steve Jobs, like, of course it's like overblown and etc. But I just wouldn't ever like to be in a position where someone can tell me to do something with my business that I don't want to do. Like, that's the scariest thing for me. Like, I'd rather it just be me doing like me and my, like, just me on the team doing my own thing, rather than having that where someone's like, no, you have to do it that way. Like, I don't know, I'm pretty I guess stubborn when it comes to that kind of thing, and I like to have this freedom of control. And so I just don't want to like, I don't want it to feel like this is a job and I have to perform and deliver to this other person. So yeah, I don't think I've, like, when we do raise in the future, I don't see myself giving up control in any meaningful way. Like, information rights, of course, all those kind of things, sure. But like, yeah, I didn't start this business to have a boss.
Very cool. I love the honest answers. Thanks. When we chatted before, we discussed briefly about non-dilutive type of options, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, in Canada and other areas of the world, there's actually more and more options coming to be. What has been your experience with that? How has it helped you, at times of need, or just like at times when you needed to expand?
Yeah, I think this is the best kept secret in the startup world. This kind of category of funding. I break it down into two. One is debt. So I guess this is more maybe for like, well, we did Futurepreneur, which was like actually a really great program. It was our first $7,000 loan. Again, use it all on ads. Actually, seriously. Then we got some loans for the BDC as well, which basically helped save the company this year with COVID. Like, we just had the terrible time in March, so it really helped us with stabilizing the business. So those two, those are kind of obvious ones. I think everyone knows about them. But the ones that I think people don't really know about is the equity-free startup accelerators around the world. So I mentioned Startup Chile, and that really was a life changer for me. Like, literally changed my life, because it was me and I think two people working part-time at the company at the time in beginning of 2016. And it was kind of like in a little bit of a rut where, like, it was just me working on the business. I was literally working out of my bedroom. My office or my desk was a cutting board. Like, it was just like not cutting board, an ironing board, and it was like very kind of not the most inspiring place to work. And then we got into Startup Chile. It was this like amazing experience. We got to go down to Santiago, and then we got $40,000 in equity-free funding from the government, which at the time was, I mean, it still is, but it was a lot of money. And again, used most of it on ads. Then we did another program in Luxembourg after. So we did Start Chile, then we did Techstars, then we did another program in Luxembourg called Fit for Start, which was 50K euros, so even more money, equity free. There's a lot of bureaucracy you have to go through for it, but it's pretty awesome. Those two programs were amazing. And it helped us kind of increase our runway and not have to rely on VC capital or angel investors and other things like that. And I think was a huge improvement. And also, like, you get to like live in Luxembourg, live in Chile. There's another one in Puerto Rico, which we got into, but we didn't go, which I kind of regret, but it's okay. So I don't think, with COVID right now, probably a lot of these are on pause because you don't want to bring international folks into your country. But when things start coming, travel comes back again, hopefully next year. This is definitely a program that I highly recommend. And anyone listening to this, there's a website called Bootstrapped, like bootstrapped with an L, that has a list of all these programs. And surprisingly, not many people apply. Like, I think when I was in the Luxembourg one, we had maybe 70 or 80 applicants for 10 spots. So not that bad. And a lot of those people were kind of like super early stage startups. So if you had something kind of like in market and really a decent business, you had a really good chance of getting in. So those were really great programs, and I highly recommend everyone to check them out.
That's really interesting. It's like kind of like us when we were starting off earlier. We raised money from different kind of government programs, and that kept us going.
Yeah.
You're right. It's one of the things that people don't know about, and I'm trying to spread the message more about them. So it's a great tip. Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Another question I had that I want to kind of expand more on is, you mentioned previously to me that every time you tried to raise money, you were focusing on the wrong thing. So I just want to learn more about what the story is in terms of what happened.
Yeah, I think it's I think this also comes to the fact that like I still am not the best delegator, and definitely wasn't the best delegator in the beginning. So like a lot of the challenges for me was that I couldn't take that 6 to 12 weeks off the business and focus 100% on fundraising. I had to do both at the same time. And especially early on, if I like even took one day off, like our metrics wouldn't be the same because I was the main sales engine. And now we have an amazing team, but and that's been a huge difficult transition for me personally. So I think that also has a lot to do with it. But I would just focus a lot on the fundraise, like once I have the money, then I'll be happy kind of thing, rather than the business. And I think now like I'm really excited to just be focusing on the business and getting the business done and executing, and being heads down that way. And we get emails every once in a while from investors and have calls with them and stuff like that. And so I think that kind of success can speak for itself. And of course, like, if we do decide to fundraise, I would be much more like out there and having those meetings and taking the time. And I feel like now we're in a much better place to do that because we have kind of a team, a strong leadership team, and kind of built out a strong processes and all those things that I can take the time to do that. So I think focusing on like the business first is key. And also I think for me, delegation is something that I've just learned a lot of, and still as my team's still improving on. It's I think in a better place now than it was let's say 2-3 years ago.
And I really like your approach that if you're successful in what you do, running your business with the clients, and that it's kind of more organic, then typically things just kind of start to trickle in. Like in the sense, like you mentioned, when you do the right thing and you're doing it correctly, then organically things just start coming to you. Yeah. Is this kind of what you see might happen potentially with any future kind of opportunities regarding fundraising, or even just like in terms of how you run Vanhack long term?
I think so. I go back and forth on it, honestly. Like some days I'm like, you know what, I'm just gonna go for it. Like, let's see. And worst case scenario, I'll just say no to the term sheet. And then it's like, well, that's kind of a silly thing. Like you should raise only when you really need to, or not really need to, but like when you really truly want to and it's real. You know, I am talking to a few investors here and there about kind of the future of the business, ones that I think we could work with and see where things go. But yeah, I do feel like, you know, things will happen the right when they're supposed to, and forcing it will not, you know, it's funny, like it's actually kind of funny for me to say this, because in Vanhack, like one of our values is we go fast, and I'm sometimes way too fast and make mistakes and things like that. But now I think I'm trying to take the super opposite approach in this specific area, where I want to be really conservative and kind of take it slow. You know, actually it's funny, like we were talking here, and there's a company that I had super admiration for, and still, you know, think it's a great company, is hired.com. And there's some news, I don't know if you guys saw last week about them shutting down potentially. You know, it's
really?
not confirmed. Yeah, there's a story and information about it. And I've been thinking about that quite a bit. And like, I'm not saying that, you know, I don't know why I don't have any information inside the company. It was an article. Journalists might not write something that's factual that's happened before. But yeah, like you look at that, and I guess like I don't want to have that where like you just raise money to raise money for like just for that. And I'm not saying like, you know, I'm I'm so great and investors are running all over to give me a check. Like that's not the point at all. But like I guess I really want to just be methodical about it and build the right business and get to a point where I do have the, you know, as much leverage as possible for when I get to that negotiation, because the VC is going to want to take, you know, their 10, 15, 20%, and the valuation is going to be based on where our growth is. And if it's bad growth, then they're A, not going to invest in us at all, or B, they're going to give us a lower valuation than we would like. So yeah, that's kind of the thinking I have. And I also heard from another friend of mine that like typically when a company raises Series A or Series B, the founder has like 10% or less of the business, and that's kind of scary to me. And also like you see cases here in Vancouver with Plenty of Fish. The guy had 100% of the business, sold it for $500 million. That's not going to be the case for Vanhack, but you know, maybe, who knows? But that, you know, that's a pretty cool story as well. So yeah, we're not, you know, maybe somewhere in between those two.
No, for sure. There's that kind of typical rule of thumb. Every time you raise money, you give away, depending on the company, the industry, 10 to 20% per round of your company. There's just something I want to ask. It's kind of like a personal thing you mentioned to me before, but I know earlier on, you know, and we kind of both kind of share this. I think we have that kind of like open-minded, let's be a nice guy kind of mentality towards people in general, but like, you know, we grow a thicker skin as entrepreneurs over time. You mentioned to me before that earlier on when you were trying to get the money from some people, and like you put them on this pedestal and you were trying to be super nice to them, to trying to win them over and things like that. I want to kind of get your take on sometimes the dangers of being a nice guy, you know, at times, in terms of people might take advantage of you at different occasions, or like, I'm sure you've been through a lot with everything in the last couple of years, especially probably this year with everything that happened. You know, how did you kind of evolve, or how did you change your personality to like then see things differently and not be that nice guy, you know, all the time?
Yeah, good question. You know, I think it's because I grew up in Canada, and like, you know, we have this fantastic world where most, you know, I think it's kind of a little bubble of a country, right? Like there's not that much crime and everyone's kind of nice and all that stuff. Of course, different situations, different life, etc. But I had a very, I would say maybe sheltered childhood, or like, I don't know. I was very outgoing, friends with everyone. We're all going to get along, etc. You know, having traveled abroad and lived in different countries, I know it's not like that everywhere. So I think like, yeah, for me, it was definitely learning the hard way through big mistakes that, you know, stick with you for a while. And it's not just with investors, but it's also with business partners and employees on the team and mentors. So yeah, I guess, you know, I've been burned quite a bit, and it sucks. Like, you know, you trust someone, or you say, you know what, okay, we're just gonna go your way, but then but that's not really what you want, because, you know, you just want to make them happy and kind of just move on with it, and kind of we're all going to be friends. no big deal. But then it starts creeping up and kind of bothering you more and more and more, and then gets to the boiling point, and then just it makes it worse. Whereas you could have just avoided that whole thing if you had just been honest in the start. So that kind of stuff is tough for me. I think I've just definitely grown a lot more skeptical of people, and just much more guarded in terms of like who I actually trust for real 100%, which is honestly like not that many people, basically my family. And that's just come through, trial by fire, where I've given away more equity than I would like to, or I gave someone mentorship shares that I shouldn't have, or I let someone like be a team member, and then that person goes and kind of betrays my trust in different ways. So it's a lot of learning experiences, and thankfully nothing too terrible, but I guess for me it's like now just using it as fuel to the fire of like, let's just get through it and make things like way better, so you don't have to, like, this thing looks really small in the rearview mirror. So it's good motivation that way. But yeah, I would say like vested equity is a really good tip. To give you like a real story off the record, in Vanhack we started off actually with 4 co-founders, me and 3 other people. And again, I thought this was gonna be a side project and give much like, I think it's funny, like looking back, I should have taken every single business that I start as like, this is gonna be $1 billion business, because like, why not go into it with that mindset? But I had been burned through so much failure that I just kind of was like, you know what, this is nothing. It was almost kind of like my I would have kept doing startups, I can't live any other way, but it was kind of like at a point in my life where I just was like, nothing was going right, so why would this go right? Anyway, I got some advice to give everyone equal shares. We're all 25%. And it was pretty terrible advice, because even though I was like the main person driving the business, it was my idea, I didn't have all of a sudden I could be outvoted. And like one by one, the 3 co-founders, or co-founders in quotation marks, not really, we're kind of, we let them go. So the first one was really obvious. We kind of were like, okay, first week, 2 weeks, obviously this person's not a fit. They went on vacation, weren't participating at all. I was like, okay, you're not really committed, so you're gone. The second one was a little bit harder, because he was a technical person, and he wasn't even technical himself, but he had a friend who was a developer, and then he took 3 months off because he was moving countries, and it was a whole thing, and just like, okay, you're out. And then the third one was the hardest one, because he was actually here in Canada, and we had contracts and everything. We had to buy him out, and it was super stressful. Like that whole experience of being a nice guy, of like, you know what, we're just gonna all be equals. My dad fled Soviet Union for a reason, because that never really works. So I should have definitely not made that decision. But hey, live and learn, and kind of now I can tell people to vest equity. So even if it's your best friend, you guys both have 50% of the business. You start off with earning 12.5%, each over 4 years, and there should be one CEO and all those kind of things. So nice guys sometimes do finish last, but yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
Just a couple more questions before we wrap up. It's a question about how you kind of manage some of your capital spends. Like specifically, like, with a lot of people that we speak to, they have this cash, they have these kind of cushion, and they can kind of like spend different things around their budget needs. In our business, we're kind of self-sufficient, and we have our own kind of things that we need to expend, capital things. How do you, as a business owner, determine how much of the revenue that you get goes into what kind of pockets of your budget expenditures? You don't have to go specifics or anything, but just like, how do you kind of plan that out on a quarterly basis?
Yeah, to be honest, we don't do a good job of this. Like, we don't really plan things, quarter by quarter. It's more like, here are our goals. These are OKRs for the quarter. Let's get them done. Most of the time, I will invest in something, whether it's software or ads or a conference or something like that, when we believe that there's a high potential for a return on that investment. So it's very much an ROI-driven focus. So, for example, we just started doing LinkedIn ads. We spent about $30K on that this year, for example, and We've gotten a few leads and a couple hires, hopefully soon to be it, and then that'll be like proved to be a positive ROI. So we're probably going to increase that budget to a larger amount next year. Whereas things like, for example, going to events, we used to go to a lot of those events. Now, of course, with COVID, we don't. But even before that, we looked at it and saw that it was really not the best. Like cold email was actually working for us better than events. So we said, you know what, let's stop going to events and let's focus more on outbound cold emails and improving that. So just things like that. Like we're not like a super well like structured process corporation. It's much more like we see an opportunity, we're going to go for it. So that's kind of the way that I look at it, and it's more like case by case basis to approve a cost rather than okay, you're going to have this much money for that, and if you don't spend it, then the budget goes away. We're definitely not there yet. Probably one day, but right now we're still very much enjoying the startup phase.
Yeah, that's great to hear, and I know a lot of people who raise large sums of money just have to burn it. It's just one of the mandates of like getting VC funding is that you got to spend this money.
Hey, if you need to hire any developers, happy to take it off their hands.
Nice. Love it. Last question here, Ilya, and then we'll finish up. Covered a lot of ground. You have a lot of experience in different kind of like topic areas. I wanted to ask you one thing, which is any final messages you'd like to leave to the audience in terms of the discussion around what we're having? Any kind of like golden nugget pieces that you want to part ways with?
I think if you can figure out how to sell as a CEO and founder, then you kind of control your destiny. So I would figure it out as soon as possible how to sell enough money to be sustainable, make enough money to be sustainable in your business. And then you just have kind of that weight off your shoulders where it's not like, okay, we have like 6 months of cash left. We have 5 months of cash left, 4 months of cash left. Okay, let's start calling VCs and all that stuff. But you can be at a point where, okay, we're making, let's call it 7-8K a month to pay the 2-3 people that we have on our team. Awesome, we can breathe. And I remember like dreaming about getting to that point. And I have to say, like, it's totally possible. You just need to keep overhead is super low, and just focus maniacally on customers. At the beginning, that's pretty much the only thing that matters, in my opinion. I mean, I think there's two kind of schools of thought, and some people think they need to have a perfect product to be able to launch it, and then all of a sudden everything's great. I think, if product is important, but if you can just focus on getting sales through the door. Again, I think I'm biased. If I was a developer, I'd probably be on the product side of things. But that being said, like I really feel like you can do so much with so little these days, that you owe it to yourself. Even maybe like do the sales thing first, and then be like, okay, we got to the 10K MRR, we can breathe. Now let's spend 6 months and really hammer out the product to make it perfect. I think that kind of blend maybe better like that rather than one or two extremes. I think that could be much that could be better, or that could be like just having that control and peace of mind. And it's so great, like to have that. And I would say like focus on that as much as possible.
Awesome. Ilya, it's been wonderful having you on our show. It's been a refreshing conversation, for people to know that there is another way other than getting VC funding. And I appreciate you sharing all this kind of genuine and transparent knowledge with us today. So thank you so much. So to all the people listening, thanks for listening and joining Off the Record. Just to recap, Off the Record is a podcast with the goal to build a community of founders and VCs around it so they can make their businesses better. So thanks again, and I'll see you next time. Thanks, Ilya.
Cheers.